Hello, everyone. On this week's episode of Silent Generation, we are going to discuss early skyscrapers, the earliest of which appeared in Chicago in the mid-1880s. We're going to detail how technological innovations enabled buildings like the Home Insurance Building, Monadnock Building, and Auditorium Building to achieve their heights. Much of this episode will be dedicated to Louis Sullivan, whose tripartite theory influenced the design of skyscrapers for generations to come. And you actually recommended we do this episode first because you love Louis Sullivan.
Yeah, growing up in Buffalo, we have the Guaranty or the Prudential Building, and that building really opened my eyes to architecture at a very young age. So Louis Sullivan feels really close to home. And
I thought Louis Sullivan is very on brand for the podcast, but we've never done an episode on just one individual. There are other podcasts that do that, like Stargirl, but that's not really what we do here.
Sure.
And early skyscrapers was already on my list. It was because Chicago actually has a nomination for UNESCO for there to be a World Heritage Site here for early skyscrapers, which we'll get to later.
Right.
But first, I think it might be good to address exactly what it is we're talking about, because what were early skyscrapers? They don't really meet the technical definition for what skyscrapers are today because they were too short.
Right. Yeah. In today's day and age, in a dense urban place, you have a very solid, street wall with buildings that are hundreds and hundreds of feet tall that you can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Well over 1,000 feet tall for many buildings in America, and it's almost normal now. But in these older cities, you still have these what are now very modest buildings peeking through, or that remain that were once skyscrapers.
Yeah, now early skyscrapers would just be called high-rises, but you have to frame it in the terms of like how tall was this building when it was initially built?
Right.
Because, say in the 1880s, for a building to be 10 stories, it was amongst the tallest in the world.
Yeah.
Particularly for office or residential buildings that weren't churches, but it was much more impressive to achieve that height. So early skyscrapers, typically, that term refers to buildings between 10 and 20 stories.
Sure.
But to me, here in Chicago, even buildings that do meet the technical definition, like there's this one building in the West Loop called the Row. Do you know that?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the tallest building west of the highway, or sort of just west of downtown. It's 495 feet. So it's 4 feet above the bare minimum for a skyscraper, 491 feet.
Yeah.
But to me, when I walk around the West Loop and I look at it, I'm like, oh yes, that's really important. It's impressive they built something that tall in this neighborhood, but it just doesn't actually look that tall.
No, it doesn't. But the funny thing is, in cities like Buffalo and Cleveland, or all these, these old but small cities, 494 feet would be a major contribution to the skyline. You might only have a handful of buildings that reach that level of how tall a skyscraper has to be. But, it feels like you have skyscrapers when you're walking around relatively.
Yeah. No, it's important to think about like where someone is coming from when they think about like what makes a building tall. Because here, we have over 100 buildings that meet that definition. But a city like Portland only has 4.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I don't know. I always get kind of annoyed when people from Portland, talk about it being like this really big city. Because when I look at the numbers, I'm always like, it's not really there.
It feels very much like Boston. Like it kind of swings above its weight in terms of transit and,
Cultural
bike infrastructure, culture.
Yeah.
But it really, it is kind of a smaller mid-sized city.
Yeah. No, it's crazy when just knowing, because I know the statistics of most cities in the country, and I can argue with someone on like why Minneapolis is a bigger city than say like Houston in some ways. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, anyway. But to start out with the history of early skyscrapers, we need to talk about the Home Insurance Building, which was built right here in Chicago in 1885. It was designed by William LeBaron Jenney, and it's considered the world's first skyscraper, not really because of its height, which was a meager 10 stories, but because of the techniques that were used to construct it, because it used a metal frame, and it was made out of iron. And there were previous buildings that used metal frames, but they never had been used to achieve a height of 10 stories before. And that was really what, made it the first skyscraper in the eyes of historians.
Right. And it maybe spoiler alert, but the building that replaces it now is the Field Building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a massive structure. I don't even know if Home Insurance Building would take up like one of the legs of the Field Building. But at the time it was such a monumental feat.
Yeah. No, it did get demolished, I think, in the 1930s. And it was partly because it looked so modest by the time it was replaced. People didn't really connect the historical importance of it. But the building, it had a kind of a awkward design. Yeah. It's easier to kind of notice the details if you look at a color rendition of what it looked like. But all the floors in between, say, the first floor and the top floor were incredibly, like, it looked like a bunch of small buildings stacked on top of each other. It wasn't anything that was like, the more like streamlined form of, say, Louis Sullivan's skyscrapers that we'll talk about in a little bit later.
Yeah. A lot of these buildings, they were built with the idea that they could be added on. Like, I feel like I see all the time in plans for buildings or like on an advertisement when the building first opens, it says like, could support 10 more floors or something like that. It's kind of funny. And that kind of adds to why it looks so awkward, is because there's a 2-story annex later on in its life that, maybe it wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing addition.
Yeah. With this building, when it was first getting built, it was so much lighter than what had previously come before it in terms of a building that reached that height, that building inspectors were like, we don't know if this is going to collapse or not. So I bet it was like the architect suspected it could like go higher. Then they had to kind of prove it later on.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Home Insurance Building?
I do think it's one of those things that I don't hate. I have a hard time sometimes where I don't hate the building that replaces it. It's not like some horrible 21st century building, soulless building is what, if you will, replaced it. It's a great thing that is there now. Yeah. But I have a hard time reckoning with like not being able to see certain things and missing it by 100 years or, just about that.
Yeah. I mean, when it was replaced, that was still the time in America where if a building was knocked down, you knew it was like something better was going to come around and replace it. It was only, say, in the 50s with car-oriented development that then things started to get replaced with parking lots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a fun part about American cities too, is that it's like fun, but it also kind of is heartbreaking where if you were standing on the same intersection in the loop and then you went back in time by half a century over and over again, it was like you would be in 4 different cities. It's a completely different place. The American cities rebuild themselves unlike anywhere else in the world, really.
Yeah. I mean, some places try to stop that from happening, particularly if you're in California with all the NIMBYs, but
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's there's no old town in suburban LA though.
No, but they want to think there is. But okay, now I think we can start to talk about the early Chicago skyscrapers.
Yeah.
So the tentative list that's proposed, it includes the Auditorium Building, Second Later Building, Marquette Building, Rookery Building, Monadnock Building, Old Colony Building, Fisher Building, Schlesinger and Meyer Building, and the Ludington Building. And so of this list, my favorite 3 happen to all kind of be on the same corner. They are, the Monadnock, the Fisher, the Old Colony. Do you know the intersection I'm talking about?
Yeah. I live right on the Blue Line, so every time I get off at Washington, it's like those are just like right over me. It's really pretty satisfying.
Yeah. It's the corner of Dearborn and Van Buren. There actually is
it Jackson that I'm thinking of, maybe?
Well, it's the Jackson Blue Line station.
Jackson Blue Line. That's what I meant to say.
Street north, I think, of Van Buren. But yeah, of the 3 that are there, the Old Colony Building, that's just dorms for Columbia College.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Fisher Building, that's apartments. The only one of the 3 that you can really go and visit as like a regular person is the Monadnock. Have you ever been inside of it?
I have not been inside of it, but I do stop to talk about it every time I'm in front of it. I do think it is such a fascinating building. It's really eye-catching in a very odd way. It's just very sleek and slender. All those buildings down there, like once you get towards Printers Row, I feel like all the streets become, like the blocks become narrower. So those three buildings are very thin and long, which is, I think, odd for Chicago buildings because of the square blocks. And the Monadnock Building is just so imposing, even though it's, it's really not that tall compared to a lot of the buildings around it.
Yeah. No, I've had sometimes, randomly say at like 6 a.m. when I'm walking around there and I see it for the first time. It feels like I'm looking at a monument.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, looking at like a pyramid or something, because the north end of the building, it is the tallest load-bearing masonry structure in the entire world.
Right.
It has this extremely thick base. I think it's 6 feet, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the building, at the very top, it's rectangular. And as it approaches the sidewalk, it sways out towards the sidewalk in a very satisfying way. But that's just so that it can hold up all the weight of the bricks, well, the weight of the building itself. And at the top of the building, the walls are only about a foot and a half thick of brick. And by the time you get to the bottom, they're 6 feet thick, which you said is not that thick.
Well, I read, as part of research this week, that the thickest load-bearing walls are, say, 9 feet. A sidebar thing to say. There are taller buildings than these early skyscrapers that existed that were built using traditional construction techniques. Like, even around where the Monadnock was built, I believe, it was 17 stories, but the Chicago Board of Trade building, the original one, not the one that was built in the 30s, but the original, I think was taller. And that was built using just traditional masonry. But the Monadnock, it's considered an early skyscraper, and it's on this list because the technology that was used for skyscrapers was kind of developed and implemented halfway through its construction. Because the north half, which we talked about, that was built in 1891. That's, traditional masonry. The southern half, which was built in 1893, that was using a metal frame, specifically steel. It could support much more weight than the iron frame that was used for the home insurance building. The Monadnock, that's how it got those 7 extra stories.
Yeah. It's so interesting because they do blend in together pretty well. But if you look on the inside, you can see the steel beams
Yeah, you can see the steel beams. That's one really nice thing about this building. We'll get ahead of ourselves when I think we'll loop back, but both the exterior and the interior of the building are preserved, which is actually pretty rare in terms of preservation. It's typically only the outside.
Yeah.
So the first floor, it has a bunch of businesses. Have you ever been to any of them?
No, but whenever I walk by, they seem,
Lindy.
They're you use that word. What did you mean by that?
Lindy? It's basically just to say something is old in a cool way.
Yeah. Okay.
But the technical definition is basically like the future of something is determined by its history. Wow, I really botched that. But basically, it's like the longer something has been around, the longer it will be in the future.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, there's like a barber shop, and they have like hand painted signs in the windows. It feels old timey and quaint.
Yeah.
But until you wrote that they were time period accurate, I never even really stopped to think about that. It makes me appreciate the building more.
Yeah. So all of the businesses on the first floor, they have to be businesses that would have been around when the Monadnock was first constructed in 1891, 1893. And those include things like a milliner. You can get a hat made there. You can go to a shoe repair shop. There's also a barber shop. There is a bistro called Bistro Monadnock. I just talked about it on the fine dining episode because I went there for Restaurant Week. And so those are all businesses that would have existed over 100 years ago. And they just look really cool. There aren't really that many empty storefronts in that building. But another thing, as part of visiting the Monadnock, you can go into it. You can walk through this like hallway, I suppose you call it. But you can see, mail chutes that go from the top floor down to the bottom.
Yeah.
You want to give a definition of what those are?
Mail chutes?
Yeah. I can.
How would I describe a mail chute?
Well, it was just a way, before the internet, mail was the main form of correspondence. So one way that they would send letters more quickly is they would have these chutes in tall buildings where you could drop a letter, say from the 17th floor of the Monadnock, it would fall all the way down. Sometimes they would get stuck, and they had really clever ways of unclogging the mail chutes, but the Monadnock still has them.
Maybe we'll look back on the garbage chutes of like Billionaires Row in the same fun way that we do mail chutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love, going through the Monadnock Building. This is really random, but okay, I see a therapist and
which is good.
One of the treatments he recommended I do it's called touch therapy. Right. What would you guess that means?
Is it a person touching you or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would go into the Monadnock once a week for like 2 months. Maybe I tried it for 3 months, and I would just go into this private practice, and this like old lady would just like touch me to calm down my nervous system. I didn't feel like it personally worked, but I was going to the Monadnock to do that.
Yeah. It was beyond like a massage.
No, that's the thing. It wasn't even a massage. I mean, it felt kind of nice, but it wasn't the same as like someone actually massaging your muscles.
Yeah. I feel like massage is just so satisfying that touch therapy is
no, that's why I quit. I was like, I just think intuitively this doesn't feel as nice, and I don't think it's doing as much.
Right. But, maybe it brings you closer to, late 19th century life.
Yeah. No, because it's so cool to walk the hallways of the Monadnock, because you can see, from the outside of the building, the difference between the north and southern half, but you can also see it from the inside. Because the southern half, you see the steel beams. Mm-hmm. You can see like how it was constructed differently. The exterior, though, did you know that actually it was planned to have an Egyptian revival facade?
Yeah, I did see that at some point. It was supposed to be very ornate, and instead we got this very smooth, dark. You would say that they're wider bricks, right? Like I feel like they're just massive bricks, and that's kind of why the building just feels so kind of odd in a really interesting way.
To architecture enthusiasts and architects, the building feels very modern because it doesn't have a lot of ornamentation. I mean, the reason why the southern half got built 2 years later, because it was very expensive to build something like that was that thick. They used a lot of materials, so they didn't want to spend as much in ornamentation at the end of the day. But yeah, I like how it looks as is. I mean, it does have that feeling of, encountering, say, like a pyramid or like a Roman ruin, just because it's all just like solid stone. But it would be cool to see what it looks like with Egyptian motifs.
That's true. Yeah. I feel like I'm always in front of that building during like sunset or something, and the alleyway behind the building always catches my eye because it just it's so narrow and it just absorbs light in such an incredible way. It just feels like a giant hole. I don't know how to describe it. It's really, really spectacular.
Yeah. I know there's Manhattan Henge. I don't know if there's Chicago Henge, but that would be a good place to witness it.
That's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other points on the Monadnock before you keep going?
I guess I've been in the cafe in the bottom.
Oh, the sandwich shop?
Yeah, but it just seemed like a regular cafe. I don't know.
I've always thought of going there and having lunch, but it always just seems kind of like, I mean, the sandwiches are not very creative.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be allowed to be there if they were. So.
Yeah. I just needed like an espresso or something. I was like on the run.
Yeah. Okay. So now we can talk about the Auditorium Building. So this is another building built in Chicago. It's on the UNESCO tentative list of early skyscrapers. This one was designed by Louis Sullivan. It was completed in 1889. So about 4 years after the home insurance building. And this one's on the list, I think, less so for its technical contributions to the development of skyscrapers as it is for its contributions to their aesthetic form.
Sure. The first time I was ever in Chicago, I was in the Art Institute, and I got talking to these two old men for some reason next to like the Frank Lloyd Wright desk. Mm-hmm. And they recommended me to go to Frank Lloyd Wright's house in Oak Park, which I did. The man also recommended me to go to the Auditorium Building, but I guess I didn't realize that you aren't allowed to go inside. So I just kind of looked at it from the outside, and it was, it is a beautiful building, but I wish I could have gone in. That probably would have made me appreciate it more.
Yeah, I've been in, but I'll talk about that in a second. But first, I just want to talk about the auditorium building itself because of the name. You can probably guess it has an auditorium. What that actually refers to is a really large theater. It was one of the biggest constructed ever when it was first built. But the building was originally designed to be mixed use. It had one side that was offices, a small side, then there was a theater, and then the rest of it was a hotel. But then I believe in the 50s, Roosevelt University, which is a local university, they bought the whole thing. And they merged all the hallways. It just became one structure, more or less, to the best ability that they could. And then actually, fun fact, did you know that Roosevelt, they actually built like a skyscraper on the other side of the block that connects to it?
No, I didn't know that. What skyscraper?
I mean, there's so many here. It's not important enough to have a name.
Interesting.
But the concept behind Roosevelt University is it's a relatively large school, but it's all in one building, technically.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's kind of crazy. But yeah, typically the only way that you can visit the auditorium building is by going to an event that's in the auditorium theater. I actually went there for my brother's graduation one year. That's the only time I think I've been in that. But I actually got to go into Roosevelt University itself in, I think it was 2024 or 2023, because I was doing a master's in library science, and as part of one of my class projects, I had to go and interview an archivist. And there's actually a small New Deal archive in that university because it's named after FDR.
Yeah.
And I was the first visitor there in 10 months.
Wow. I would be a visitor if they need more visitors. I think that is fascinating. I grew up I went to a high school that was built by the New Deal, and we had a plaque for FDR on the first floor.
I thought you were about to say you grew up in an FDR household.
No. Yeah, we were big FDR people back home. No, but yeah. And I don't know, I'm a photographer, and the FSA photography is, really one of my biggest inspirations. There's some really amazing documentation photography that came out of the New Deal. That would be I wonder if they have any pictures.
Yeah, no, they have that sort of thing in the archive. The archive, it has sort of personal items people owned that had effigies or representations of FDR. And then they also have things from the actual New Deal that were the cultural works, because it wasn't only infrastructure projects and monuments that got built. It was also people were documenting folklore and folk music.
That's one of the most amazing things. They just gave people a bunch of glass plates and were like, here, go take pictures of stuff. And it was all farmers.
Yeah. So the archive was cool to visit. Okay, one more fun fact.
Sure.
They happen to have the chair that Harold Washington died in there.
Okay, morbid question. How did Harold Washington die?
Of a heart attack while he was mayor. So for people who don't know, that was the first black mayor of Chicago. Yeah. But yeah, he died in his chair while being mayor. And,
it was his mayor's chair? It wasn't?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I know. It's but it just looks like a used chair from the 80s that's not very nice.
Yeah.
And it's the type of thing where it's I guess, we got to hold on to this.
Right. Yeah, as most, governmental things, bureaucratic things are in the 80s, is not really the most spectacular, fancy things, but...
Yeah. But okay, the building itself. So I went, to go interview this archivist. I had no idea what I was entering.
Right.
I kind of, I knew that building was one of Louis Sullivan's. I didn't really connect I was going to go visit it that day. So I entered it and I was like, whoa, there's so much ornamentation on the inside, because the main entrance for the school is now what was the main foyer or entrance for the hotel. And I mean, a lot of it's original. There's not that much that's been replaced, thankfully. And she also brought me up to the 10th floor, which has the Murray Green Library. That was the dining hall for the hotel. And it has these arched ceilings that are kind of similar to the auditorium.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, the outside is not it's not super ornamental, I wouldn't say, right? It's gray. It's very large. The proportions are very obtuse. So I feel like it almost blends in. And the interior, is just stunning from the photos that I've seen.
No, when the building was first built, it was considered to be kind of minimal. Yeah. The exterior in particular. The interior is pretty ornate, but the exterior was made to kind of be the opposite of European theaters, which were had very thick walls. thick walls, or I should say the ornamentation kind of got in the way of the amount of space that could be dedicated to the performance. So Louis Sullivan, he actually designed the theater to have as much interior space as possible. The stairways and those types of things were made to be like kind of narrow so that there could be more space.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of theaters in America that kind of follow that old tradition. So seeing it stripped back, it really is kind of just Louis Sullivan's step in the world of architecture, not just in America. It's kind of that period in time, I feel like, is the transition of America from like old world to new world in a way.
Yeah, Louis Sullivan, who we can start to kind of talk about now.
Yeah.
He is considered the father of American architecture, and he was really consciously trying to create a new aesthetic style for American architecture to follow. And he thought that skyscrapers could be the main contribution of America to architecture, because it was this new form that was developing out of Chicago at the time. And yeah, I mean, I think his main contribution to skyscrapers wasn't as much in the technical sense, because the Auditorium Building, it really didn't use metal frames. It was that the building, it had his sort of tripartite design, which we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Louis Sullivan?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Louis Sullivan was born in Boston in the mid 1800s. And in 1879, he partnered with engineer Donkner Adler to create Adler and Sullivan, which is one of the greatest American architecture firms. We could say that over and over again the whole time, but it's true. They were incredibly influential. And Louis Sullivan, he was a part of the Chicago School of Architecture too, which you will see when you're downtown, you'll see like Chicago windows on new buildings, which I find very funny. Like there's nods to the Chicago School even in current architecture in the city. Yeah.
Another way that he's kind of grouped in is as being one of the big three, with Frank Lloyd Wright. And then, wait, who is the third one? Henry Hobson Richardson. I actually am not that familiar with him.
You don't know H.H. Richardson?
Not as much.
Henry Hobson Richardson, he is who Richardsonian Romanesque is named after. So there's all those like big stone castle-like buildings that you find. I feel like there's less of it in Chicago. There's a bunch in like Cleveland, I feel like. And Buffalo has the psych ward, the old psych ward near Buffalo State College campus. And near the art museum, there's kind of like this like triangle of buildings. And it's an old psych ward, and it was actually used as a model for Arkham Asylum or something like that in the video game. It's kind of like a weird, it pops up in pop culture all the time, and it's just this random old abandoned psych ward, semi-abandoned.
No, I am familiar with the Richardson Romanesque style, because there are some mansions in Chicago that were built using it. I think there are some along Lakeshore Drive, and then I've seen some along Prairie Avenue, which used to be like a millionaire's row in the city. But Louis Sullivan, he has a really recognizable style. It looks incredibly organic, not in the literal sense like it's direct representations of nature, but he taps into the aesthetics of what makes things organic in this really complex and nuanced way.
Yeah, like he kind of defined what a skyscraper should look like and what makes it organic. He made a skyscraper look like its own thing. It's kind of an extension of he made skyscrapers their own beings in a sort of way with how he designed them.
Yeah, it typically is pretty abstract, but the most like literal it ever gets is like there are some buildings where you will see like leaves.
Yeah.
Like there's this department store in Iowa, the Van Allen building, where that you can see that on the terracotta.
Sure.
But Louis Sullivan, he actually is credited with having been the originator of the phrase form follows function, meaning that form is prioritized over ornamentation or the aesthetic. And to me, learning that, it's really kind of surprising because his work is so ornamented and he doesn't seem to be that functional, especially compared to the modernists that came after him.
Right. And on top of this, Frank Lloyd Wright, who is, one of the most famous architects in American history and probably the biggest household name in terms of architects, he studied under Sullivan at Adler and Sullivan. And if you ever go to Frank Lloyd Wright's house, have you ever been?
No, I've been on the outside.
Okay.
I didn't go for like a tour, so I didn't really get to see the real thing.
I feel like the whole tour is really just like based around their lives together, and it's pretty comical in some ways, but also kind of sad in other ways, where when he was working at Adler and Sullivan, he wasn't allowed to make any buildings on his own. It was part of their contract. And now all over Oak Park, there are what they called bootleg Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. And he actually made like dozens of houses under his architect friend's name.
Yeah. I've seen some of those. I mean, those I think are my favorite ones that I've seen in Oak Park.
Yeah.
So I now want to talk about his tripartite theory, which we've referenced a few times. Sorry for not explaining it yet.
That's okay.
But it seems pretty intuitive. But his idea was that skyscrapers, their design should be divisible in three parts. There should be a base, a shaft, and a cornice. There should be a strong foundation or base. Then the shaft should be very minimal and look really tall and elegant. And then the cornice should be the most ornate part. It should just look the coolest.
Yeah.
And that's something you still see. And like you see the influence of that with the design of modern skyscrapers even, given that they aren't just like a glass sheet.
Yeah. That's, I guess, what makes it so organic, not just in terms of having leaves on the facade, but he took the functions of a building and really
thought about them.
Yeah, he really thought about them. Like a cornice is structural. It's not just for design, but he, integrated into the ethos of how you design your building and really,
Wait, this is going to sound bad. I didn't know that cornices were functional.
Really?
I thought they were just decorative.
Oh yeah. No, it makes sure that water is at least, a foot or so away from the bottom of the building.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't know that until doing this episode, I didn't know that he coined the term form follows function.
Yeah.
I guess I credit it with him or but I thought that was more of a thing in my headcanon. I thought that was always something that people just attributed to him because that's kind of like how he worked so well. But I didn't realize that was his phrase. That's so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, did you know that not Jane Addams, Jane Jacobs, she's the origination of the term social capital. Like it's crazy when you learn about a historical figure that it's such a big career, and then they have this like footnote where there's just this term that everyone knows.
Right. That is true.
Yeah.
That is really funny.
But no, I mean, in his designs, like even say the Auditorium Building, it is clear he's thinking a lot about function because he didn't just follow the blueprint of European theaters. He thought about what they were for, which is performances, and he designed all of these newer like architectural features in the theater that had never really been done before, for the Auditorium Theater in particular.
Yeah. He also incorporated the curtain wall into all of his buildings, or most of his buildings that we've been kind of talking about. But he would use really interesting. The curtain wall being. Oh yeah. Yeah, the curtain wall being. The skeleton of the building being steel and having brick or terracotta, kind of hanging off of it. That brick really isn't holding up the structure of the building at all. It's just there for decoration. But he took it a step further with different colors of terracotta and different designs in the terracotta and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about, but say in the 1880s, these early skyscrapers, like now, brick and almost every structure, it's not load bearing. It is purely like aesthetic. But back then, it wasn't like really as much of an aesthetic choice. It was okay, this is just how you build buildings.
Yeah.
Like you have to have brick on the outside.
Yeah. It's one of those funny, like if you're a true purist, you would enjoy those panels of prefab bricks.
Yeah. And then in relation to his tripartite theory, I didn't realize this, but his like architectural ethos or architectural blueprint formula, it was sort of antithetical to Frank Lloyd Wright's, because Frank Lloyd Wright, he emphasized the horizontal. He designed homes that were like sort of inspired by the prairie and were meant to look really long.
Yeah.
And he used a lot of architectural tricks to convey that. Louis Sullivan, very similar, but the opposite in terms of the vertical, where he's thinking about how to make the building look as tall as possible by having that, more minimal shaft that was as long as possible before getting to the cornice at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to blend in with the environment around it. So much so that he went beyond Louis Sullivan's style of imprinting leaves or vines into the structure. And Frank Lloyd Wright used materials from the sites that he was building on.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like Great Cliff in, it's kind of right outside of Buffalo on the cliffs of Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm.
It was built as a summer home for the Martin family, and he used limestone from the site, from the cliffs, from limestone from the cliffs, and sand from the beaches in the stucco, and the limestone rusted like the cliffs that are surrounding it because it was the same limestone. It's really, really quite spectacular.
Yeah. Another example that's not really related to, using the natural environment around the building, but another way that he sort of emphasized the longitudinal forms that I just want to touch, the Roby House.
Yeah.
Basically, all of the mortar in between the vertical lines was meant to match the color of the brick. And then the mortar that was longitudinal, horizontal, that was made to be this bright white color. And so your eye could, go from one end of the mortar to the next for each row of bricks. And it was meant to just like carry your eye.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like just like such a very like minute detail that shows like how much he thought about these things.
Right. And he would only be able to think about those things so much if he worked for Sullivan, I feel like. Because why would you be thinking about the different colors of mortar between your brick? Like, why would you be, no one else would come to that conclusion of having 4-foot wide bricks on this residential house in a streetcar suburb, unless you were working for Sullivan, who was
perfectionist.
He's meticulously designing every inch of his buildings.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite Louis Sullivan building?
Let me think. I mean, I think the easy answer is the Guaranty or the Prudential Building in Buffalo. It's just a very special, beautiful building. But there's like one random one that I really like. It's a jewel box bank in Newark, Ohio. It's called the Home Building Association. I do just think that one it's such a of the time building, and it's so much smaller scale than everything else that he did. And it's just very beautiful.
Yeah, later in his career, after he stopped building all of these skyscrapers in Chicago and Buffalo, other places, he designed a bunch of banks in kind of small towns, like, say, for a farmer's bank in Iowa. He did about a dozen of those, and I think they're referred to as jewel box banks.
Yeah.
And they're really pretty.
Yeah, they really are. But it is also a sign of his, like, declining career. Once Adler and Sullivan kind of broke up, he really was not carrying on the same amount of power that he was early on.
Yeah. No, he died penniless. He died pretty obscure. It was only later that I think, Richard Nichols, other sort of activists who were really interested in Sullivan's work, popularized his name again in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, not unlike Frank Lloyd Wright, who also had a pretty tumultuous life towards the end of his career, was building hundreds of houses a year, basically, but had no money to show for it.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I mean, he died famous, at least, though.
Yeah, that's kind of the great, interesting branch of their lives, in my opinion, is that the mentor and the student both died broke, but one was famous and one wasn't.
Yeah. But, okay, my favorite Sullivan building is actually the Prudential Building, too. And now I think we can do a section on early skyscrapers in Buffalo, because that's where you're from.
Yeah. And
I actually happen to really like the architecture in Buffalo. Like, if I were ever to visit that area, okay, yes, I would see Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
That's over there. But the thing I'd be really excited for is the architecture, because that's my favorite Louis Sullivan building. And we can talk about that now.
Yeah. I mean, Buffalo is a funny place where people say it's known for things and whatever, but it is a really small city. And I would have a hard time being like, wow, it's this big, grand, amazing place. But it is, the architecture there is beautiful.
Yeah.
Despite, maybe like urban renewal problems that happened. We have some really great gems like City Hall that we'll talk about, and maybe another episode on Art Deco. But one of the greatest ones, and maybe one of the most famous besides City Hall, is the Prudential Building, which is now called the Guaranty Building. Do you want to talk about it?
Oh, well, I learned actually that the like dual name, Prudential or Guaranty, that's actually been sort of interchangeable from the very beginning
Yeah.
because the building was commissioned, I forget by which of the two, but yeah, the facade actually says Guaranty and Prudential
Yep.
because during mid-construction, it changed hands.
Right. I think that Guaranty came second, but yeah, it is funny. Like above the doorway in orange terracotta, it says Prudential, and then on the side it says Guaranty.
Yeah.
And it uses kind of Louis Sullivan's concept of the front facing facade is very gorgeous and the back is kind of ugly brick.
It is?
Yeah. Because it has this light well in the back, which is now filled up with more building. So the light well is like maybe a third of the size. But the back is kind of just like a regular masonry building. But is it 3 sides? I think it's just 2 sides that are on the corner that are like the really bright terracotta. And it was only built out of terracotta because there was like a brick workers strike going on at the time and they didn't want to deal with them. So they just commissioned someone to make terracotta instead.
Wow. I mean, I'm glad they did because it's really, really beautiful. I mean, this is my favorite Sullivan piece because it's like the most maximalist, like organic lace work on the outside pretty much. I mean, my favorite part is the cornice because it really elegantly connects to the shaft in this way where you don't even really see a line. It just looks like the cornice is growing out of the building basically.
No, it really does. And when you're standing in front of it in person, you realize like that goes all the way down to the ground level. The doorways look like a lattice kind of vines going around it. It's really spectacular.
Are there any other parts of the interior that are original other than the lobby?
Yeah, so the lobby is completely restored. I think that took like decades and a ton of money. And I mean, now I think they have a lawyer, like a law firm inside. So they're using a lot of money. But yeah, the lobby, I think that the floor plates are kind of just basic office floor plates now. I couldn't really find any pictures of the inside. I don't know if they show any pictures when you're there, but the first floor next to the gorgeous lobby with has like these light wells on the ceiling with glass and a birdcage elevator. And next to that, there is a little tiny museum that kind of tells the story of Louis Sullivan and the building itself. And it has these really funny pictures from like the 60s or something where they're on the top floor with the circle windows and they have like rectangular blinds hung from the circular windows. And everyone just like hated working in this stupid, beautiful building because it was like, it's Louis Sullivan. It has to be functional. Yeah. But by 60s standards, they're like, why is this not a giant box? So I think that is really kind of funny. And they spent a ton of money restoring the lobby. I'm sure the stairwell going all the way up is nice still with the steel, but
yeah, I mean, I would suspect the inside is like just like boring at this point. I mean, that's how a lot of like historic buildings are. Yeah, like even the Louis Design Sullivan building, that was like the Marshall Fields building. That one, all the floors are just like, that's where the Goth Target is, but all the regular floors are just
Target,
like basic. Like you can't even tell you're in a beautiful structure.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, one other thing I really like about the building, we haven't really talked about this yet, but with early skyscrapers, the light fixtures are really bizarre because they were still figuring out how lighting really worked. And the arrangement at times, it kind of looks floral in a way. Like you'll see the light bulbs, like these bare Edison bulbs kind of clustered together. Yeah. So the exterior of the Guaranty building, it also has these light fixtures that have that.
Yeah. There's also these like basement windows that were kind of like the garden level that they've like covered up and stuff because it's like had problems. But it's like, would have let in really nice light in the basement too, which is now home to... Oh no, I'm thinking of a different building. I'm sorry. But, yeah.
It's a great building though.
It really is.
So it almost got knocked down in the 70s though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was it was a really big preservation effort. Maybe one of the first after we had the Larkin administration building by Frank Lloyd Wright. That would be maybe a skyscraper of the time.
Oh yeah.
Was demolished. That was just a massive, massive building. That was demolished. I think they sold the plot of land for $1 because no one would buy it. And the Erie County Savings Bank, which was like a block away, kind of in the old financial district of Chicago. Oh, sorry.
Buffalo.
The old financial district of Buffalo. Erie County Savings Bank, which was a George B. Post building, looked like a weird castle that was demolished about a decade prior. So I think that those two losses, those were two really massive public
failures.
Yeah, public failures. Like people just loved those buildings. It wasn't, it wasn't that people didn't want them around. And because of that, people really wanted to hold on to the Prudential building.
Yeah. I mean, another thing too with these early skyscrapers, if they were less innovative at the time and they used more traditional construction methods, like they had a really solid foundation still.
Yeah.
Those are really expensive to knock down.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not even really worth it half the time.
I think it was one of those things that was like the Federal Building in Chicago, where it was just kind of this old thing and people at the time didn't appreciate stuff like that. And if the building was 60, 70 years old in the 50s, then I don't know, it was just an old dank building to them. But I'm sure the general public didn't feel the same way.
Yeah. Are there any other Buffalo buildings you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's a couple more. I really could nerd out about this for a while, but I'll try and be quick, I guess. There's the Ellicott Square Building, which might be my favorite building in Buffalo. Just, it's kind of odd. The outside kind of reminds me of the Auditorium Building. It's just big and large and obtuse and gray. It used to have a really nice cornice that they got rid of in the 70s, of course. But the Ellicott Square Building, it's named after the man who subdivided Buffalo in the early 1800s. He set up the radial street network and kind of laid the groundwork of what Buffalo would look like. So the name is pretty important. And it was briefly the largest office building in the world at the time, with 447,000 square feet. But at 10 stories, it seems laughable. And within 30 years, we had Merchandise Mart, which kind of served a similar purpose. It kind of puts into scale of how big things got within those few decades. Where this tiny little building was the largest office building by square feet in the world. But
no, that's an interest, because most people, when they think about biggest building, they think about height.
Yeah.
And most skyscrapers are, much taller than they are wide.
Right.
But yeah, it's also interesting to think about the biggest buildings in terms of volume.
Right.
Because those can be really thick.
Yeah, it's just really large. It's a whole city block. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of set up like the Rookery. The inside is an open to the public courtyard with really beautiful stairwells and shops and stuff like that.
Isn't it the same architect?
Yeah, so it's not the exact same architect. It's Charles Atwood, who worked at the Burnham Company.
Okay.
So Daniel Burnham.
Yeah, because when I looked at pictures of the Ellicott Square Building online, it really looked like the Rookery in Chicago.
Yeah.
Because it has that glass atrium. Because a lot of these early skyscrapers, I mean, they were starting to incorporate electricity, but they thought about natural light a ton more than people do now. And so they would have things like that, like glass atriums that would let light in.
Right. That kind of detail really reminds me, or makes the Rookery so special to me, because I can go in there and it feels like I'm in the Ellicott Square Building, eating lunch on a Saturday or whatever. It's really sweet.
I know. Yeah, no, this is a really, there's so many buildings in Buffalo that I've just never heard of. But did you want to talk about the Dunn Building too?
Yeah, sure. So the Dunn Building is also kind of in this same area of downtown. It's a small downtown, but if you were to subdivide it, it's kind of in the same kind of center.
They're close by.
Yeah, they're close by. And I don't think anyone's technically ever called it a skyscraper. I think they call it a high rise, but it is 10 stories, and it's the first steel frame high rise built in Buffalo.
Yeah.
It was designed by Green and Wicks, who, if you look into Buffalo architecture at all, it feels like they designed everything that people love there, like the art museum and the Gold Dome Bank and stuff like that. So they're really good. They're really big for Buffalo architecture.
Sounds like they're more local.
Yeah, they're very local, but they built a ton of really awesome stuff. It's really funny. But yeah, that building is really great. And
yeah, no, I like the design of it. It's good to get a deep cut on here.
Yeah,
because this is not one I would have heard of. But Yeah, I mean, it was built the same year as the home insurance building,
Right.
same height, I believe. So, I mean, I don't really get why this is like not considered a skyscraper. Or wait, it's 10 years later. Never mind. So
Yeah, it's 10 years
it wasn't
later.
quite innovative enough.
No. But there is a really good ramen restaurant in the basement that you should go to. It's called Kedara if you're ever in Buffalo.
Yeah. So now in terms of talking about early skyscrapers, we do need to touch on New York City, but I do not want to linger here for very long. Just because I don't think we're going to have anything to say about, the Chrysler Building or the Empire State Building that hasn't already been said.
Right.
But, Chicago, we did originate the skyscraper. We won the battle. That is why, we may get the UNESCO World Heritage Site here, because we did contribute that to the history of the world. But
Absolutely.
NYC really kicked our butts.
Yeah.
Because actually in 1892, Chicago banned the construction of buildings taller than 150 feet. So that really kneecapped all of the progress we were making in terms of building higher and higher. And then New York City just ate our cake.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like they were coming out with a new tallest building in the world every couple years. Maybe between the Chrysler and the Empire State Building, wasn't it months? I feel like it was less than a year or something like that.
Well, I learned actually this week, I think the Empire State Building was built in a year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
You can never do that now.
No, not at all. But I don't know, the height limit in Chicago, I do find to be somewhat of a blessing in disguise even though we don't have the same skyline as New York. Because I think it makes the city very satisfying. It's not landlocked by water or anything. So it kind of allows Chicago to have this natural balance where it really tapers off in a very comfortable way throughout the whole city. And, Chicago is almost, people come from New York and they're like, wow, this place is residential or something. But it really almost has the same density as a place like Madrid. And I think that just New York's density is so unnatural. There are very few places that are that population dense in the world. I mean, sure, we don't have as many super talls downtown, but I don't know if I've ever been in Manhattan and looked at the new super talls and
noticed them.
Yeah, noticed them or been mad that there aren't more of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have enough tall buildings. We don't need to build, because I think we're 200 behind them now in terms of actual skyscrapers.
Yeah.
That's fine. I would like if we built more here, but they won the war. That's fine.
I agree.
But in general, what are your thoughts on New York City? Because the first time I met you at the dinner party, I'd guess that was a little bit rude. They met you and they were like, oh, you're from Buffalo. Why did you move to Chicago instead of New York City? Because from her perspective, if you were going to move to a big city, New York City is in your home state. Why did you choose Chicago?
I thought that this answer would feel way more straightforward when I was first moving here. And I was like, everyone will understand. But now I find myself describing where Buffalo is to people all the time, almost every day. And it kind of offends me, not because I think you should know what Buffalo is, whatever, but it's a Great Lakes city. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's something about, New York City to Buffalo is a 6-hour drive, 6.5-hour drive, 10 hours by Amtrak. But I don't know. I've always felt way more connected to the Great Lakes cities, going to Toronto and going to Detroit. It just made more sense in my head of types of people that I'd meet.
Yeah.
And the history and
yeah. I heard you talk about how you thought that Buffalo was connected to Chicago through the Midwest, because you said basically, in your opinion, Buffalo is the origin of the Midwest, because the canal, right?
Right. Yeah. So someone kind of countered this theory recently with Cincinnati being the first Midwest city, because maybe it was
they got bigger much faster.
Yeah, it was maybe
crazy big for some reason.
Yeah, same with St. Louis. St. Louis and Chicago were neck and neck until we reversed the river or whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, Cincinnati, they have the Mississippi River or whatever, or or Ohio River.
Yeah,
but Buffalo, we had the Erie Canal. We're the terminus of the Erie Canal, so that in 1825 opened up the Atlantic seaboard to the Great Lakes. And it kind of made the Great Lakes, it made Chicago the most western point of the eastern seaboard in some way, even though it's fresh water. And in my mind, even if there's Cincinnati, you know, Cleveland and Detroit and Chicago would have never become what they are without Buffalo. And, you know, Buffalo wasn't even in the original 13 colonies. Like when you look at maps of it, it's still just like French territory at that time. So it's definitely a newer place. It doesn't feel like an East Coast city at all, because it's not.
Yeah. Another section I just want to address, skyscrapers as monuments to capitalism. So a lot of people have probably already heard this sort of anecdotally, but the American literature professor, Joseph Campbell, he once said in The Power of Myth, 1988, that you can tell what's informing a society by what the tallest building is. When you approach a modern city, the tallest places are the office buildings, the centers of economic life. And the American skylines, they've been dominated by skyscrapers for the last 100 years, or actually longer.
Yeah, way longer.
Something I realized as I was doing research for this week is actually the tallest buildings in New York City and Chicago at different points have literally more or less been the market. Like here, the Board of Trade, both the original building and the new one were the tallest buildings for long periods of time. Like the newer one, say from 1930 to 1965. And then New York City, I mean, if you think about the Twin Towers and then the One World Trade Building, it's just like, it's quite literal.
Yeah.
And I never really put that together before.
Yeah, like in the research we saw like that there was a transition where it went from religious buildings being the tallest buildings in a city, which you can still see like if you're in kind of more small town America or like semi-rural places, like in a small little old cluster of a town, the church still is the tallest thing, to civic buildings, and then it, you know, transitions into the modern, which is office buildings. But
that brief period, though, that interstitial where civic buildings were the tallest buildings in some American cities, that actually, I don't ever really see people comment on this, because most people are aware that the tallest buildings, you know, used to be churches, now they're skyscrapers, monuments to capital. But that interstitial period where, say, like the city halls of Philadelphia, of Milwaukee, of Minneapolis, you know, that suggests that there was a time in America where civic values were the most important values people held.
Yeah.
And that actually does align with like what was happening at the time, because people were building public libraries, public transportation systems, public schools. I mean, the whole entire education movement was happening around the time that these city halls were going up. And it's just crazy to think about that. And that's something actually in Silent Generation, me and Joseph tried to sort of espouse, is that Naomi Klein, she commented that, you know, people are now consumers instead of citizens.
Right.
And that's something I want to flip. I want people to view themselves as members of the public.
Absolutely. I mean, I was bringing up that the Brooklyn Bridge, even to use New York as an example, the Brooklyn Bridge was the tallest structure in New York when it was built. Like that is, and that's a civic structure. Maybe it's not a city hall, but that connected the two largest cities in America at the time together and, you know, made this mega metropolis that we have now.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think a tremendous effort went into building that bridge. It didn't have to be that tall, probably. They could have done something else, but
no, that's a good observation, because I wouldn't have connected that city hall period to bridges, but no, that's like totally on point.
It's something that I notice with Chicago all the time, that, you know, maybe that the bridge isn't as tall as the Brooklyn Bridge, but every bridge here feels like it has so much care about what it looks like. Like even random bridges like in the North Side, in like kind of a weird part of like post-industrial Chicago, the bridge will be like this beautiful like stone and metal bridge. Like I feel like the infrastructure in cities of this period were cared for so much.
Yeah. No, we did an episode, you know, on infrastructure aesthetics, where we talked about how infrastructure it's hidden now instead of like people hide it instead of trying to make it beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a period where people were able to make it pretty.
Yeah. I feel like you guys talked about the complete streets thing in that one, right?
Rings a bell.
Okay.
But yeah, before we wrap up, I just want to talk about this meme that circulates pretty often on like architectural revival corners of the internet. Like I've seen it on Reddit a few times, but it's this shot of like Michigan Avenue where it goes over the river.
Yeah.
And
like
you
the
see,
bottom of Mag Mile.
Yeah, the start of the Magnificent Mile. And you see like some of our prettiest early skyscrapers, like the Tribune Building, the Wrigley Building, and
Jewelers Building.
yeah, there's some really pretty ones. But like when you see this posted on the internet, oftentimes people are like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe like, cities don't look like this anymore." And then like Chicagoans will always comment like, all these buildings are still around.
Yeah.
Like literally not a single one in that picture has been knocked down.
Yeah.
And like it gets crazy and accurate sometimes. Like there's this one post I found where someone said, "It looks like a fairy tale city, perhaps the Emerald City or something," like that. And then the caption reads, "Historical photo of the Chicago Loop." It's not the Loop.
It's not the Loop. Yeah.
I know. It's just like chock full of so many inaccuracies.
Yeah, Chicago's lucky that it has the river because it opens up the city in a way that is very unique. And those buildings feel so much larger when you're standing on Michigan Avenue, on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, than they really are. Like if you're ever in West Loop and you're looking, like maybe you're on a bridge and so you have like a little bit higher vantage point, sometimes you can see the Tribune Tower in between a bunch of giant buildings and it is so tiny. But the way that the city is set up and the way that the buildings talk to each other, it allows you to kind of have this open vista where it still feels like Victorian America or something, where you have these like, and they're all like, the white buildings. They're very beautiful.
It's kind of like a flaneur thing going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Michigan Avenue Bridge turns everyone into a flaneur, I feel like. Or it's like hard to not be a flaneur.
Oh yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I love that part of the city. But yeah, I mean, it loops into this other thing with early skyscrapers, which is just, I mean, they were all pretty. I mean, I really haven't seen any pictures of any that I've been like, "Oh my God, I'm glad they knocked that down."
Unpopular opinion, I don't like the old Federal Building.
Oh, really? I mean, it looks imposing. I can understand that.
It just feels like a hodgepodge. Like I can't figure it out, I guess. Maybe it is just the imposing part.
Yeah. No, it feels a little off for its scale.
Yeah,
it's like
the
really
dome
big.
is really large and but like tall. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Yeah. But Sebastien, what do you think it would take for skyscrapers to be beautiful again in this sort of like early skyscraper way?
I mean, I think we've figured out the shape of buildings so much down to most architects are not even really defining the shape of it unless like they're very tall. But buildings in the scale that we're talking about that are maybe relatively not 10 stories anymore, let's say 20 stories. Those shapes are relatively defined by zoning and air rights laws and whatever. But to make that kind of skeleton beautiful, I think it really just comes down to like materials. What do you think?
Yeah. Wait, but what kind of materials? Like what makes
I mean, you see so much like glass, which it's really easy to hate on glass. I think architects view glass as kind of like a mirror or like kind of a transition that makes it almost see-through, but it's not see-through at all in real life. It's usually like blue or black. And then on the other side, you have that metal cladding that everyone uses.
Yeah.
And that's also really easy to hate. And it's just funny that we're in this place of architecture where the two types of buildings that are getting built are like so massively hated by everyone. And they've been like value engineered into only building with those two materials when they could just use those materials in maybe a more creative way. Or I don't know, like brick wasn't that exciting 100 years ago, but like they were making really great things with brick.
Yeah. I mean, I think for skyscrapers, like the most beautiful material, I mean, for the Louis Sullivan buildings that we just talked about, terracotta is what really gave it its ornamentation and beauty. And there actually has been a trend of like particularly skyscrapers in New York City getting built with some terracotta. Actually, does the Brooklyn Tower, I think that might use it possibly. We didn't look at that up. But
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I've seen many pictures online though of buildings there that do incorporate it now.
I've seen terracotta used in a similar way to that metal paneling. What is that metal paneling called?
The cladding?
Is it just cladding? I feel like there was
I would just call it cladding.
There's an acronym for something that I was.
Yeah, too bad we don't have Joseph.
Yeah, he would know. But that metal cladding, I've seen people use that terracotta in a way that kind of is like a bridge in between, and that definitely makes it look a lot more natural. I think you just need less glass. It's bad for, I don't know, we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves with like air conditioning and heating, but then we use glass, which is bad for both. And maybe there's like new high tech glass that is better, like that whatever they're putting on the Thompson Center.
Yeah, they put like coatings on the glass that can be like triple coated.
Sure. But just use less glass then. If it's like, so you have to use all this technology to like counteract the technology that kind of took away all the character in architecture. So yeah, just less glass and maybe terracotta.
Yeah. My theory about how to make skyscrapers more beautiful, again, this applies to construction in general, but additive manufacturing, like 3D printing, one of the attributes of it is that complexity is free. Because if you 3D print like a solid block, that takes more time than printing out a block that has some degree of ornamentation. Even a little bit will make it go faster and cost less. So adding detail doesn't cost anything. So that, I think, is the hope. That is the way to like make buildings more pretty again. Because a lot of the early skyscrapers, the buildings people love, like say even the Tribune Tower, that is like was designed to look like this Gothic cathedral, and that you could never really do that today unless maybe with say 3D printing. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the competition by the way?
Yeah, I was gonna say we never talked about the Tribune Tower competition. If you don't know that there was a contest held by Chicago Tribune for architects to come up with a design for the building in 1922.
Yeah.
Obviously, we got the amazing Gothic one that we have, and everyone loves that building. It was designed by Howells and Hood.
The competition part of the name, the public chose that one out of, I believe, 400 submissions.
Really?
Yeah. They voted, and that was the one that they wanted the most.
Okay. And but the second place winner, it turned out to be almost more influential to the architecture world. It was designed by, how do you say that? Eliel?
Oh, I don't know that architect.
I was thinking of looking it up, but the second place winner, it almost turned out to be more influential in the architecture world. It was designed by Eliel Saarinen, the father of Eero Saarinen, who designed like the tulip table and the St. Louis Arch. So, his son ended up being this like really popular person in terms of interior design. And he designed this like really amazing Art Deco building. It kind of reminds me of, do you know the super tall that's getting built in New York right now? It's like 175 Park Ave, or there's some other nickname for it, but I don't know. It's just like this really tall, and there's like the beams are crossing each other like lattice. And it looks like Metropolis or something. Like it looks like it's really interesting.
Very Art Deco.
It's like the pinnacle of Art Deco.
Yeah. No, this building, I mean, I like it. It would have been cool if it got built. But in general, architecture theorists, they love to criticize the Tribune Tower competition because they always say like, oh, the public, this building they picked, it's nice, but all of the designs that weren't picked were so much better. Look at all of these interesting modernists that went on to do all these other things. Because by that point, architecture critics, they still just like kind of hate ornamentation, and they can't fathom that like the public, today still loves the Tribune Tower, still would pick that today, I think. Yeah. Because like our tastes really haven't changed. Like we recognize that something that has that much detail takes more work. That adds to the beauty. Yeah. But anyway, there's just this big disconnect between the public and architects and architecture theorists still.
I mean, even the NBC Tower a block away, or I don't know the exact name of it, but the building that has NBC in it. Yeah. That has flying buttresses to kind of harken back to the Tribune Tower. And maybe that's like corny or lowbrow or something, but it does like connect the two together in a funny way. That is, I know it's obviously designed by an architect, but I've always thought that was kind of funny that they talk to each other in that way.
Yeah. No, there's some nice synergy.
Yeah. The JP Morgan Chase building in New York that just got built, ever since the render dropped, I had always wished that it was being built in Chicago. It just feels so Chicago. It's like giant and dark and has steel beams going diagonal through it. It kind of looks like the Hancock Tower.
Yeah. I mean, I actually do like the design, but I don't look at other cities' buildings and think like, oh my God, I wish that was built here.
I don't usually feel that way. It just feels so Chicago, and it doesn't feel very New York in my opinion. Like the 175 Park. Oh, it's Commodore. That's the name I was thinking of. Commodore project. That definitely looks like New York City. It's like very Art Deco and spruced up. But this like big, giant, like edgy building. I don't know. I've always thought it just felt like it would fit in here, but
I can see that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for doing this episode with me. I think you did a great first job.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I look forward to keep working with you.
Yeah, no, me too. I'm so happy to be here. It's very strange going from Instagram DM to now sitting in Nathan's living room recording this episode. But here we are, and we have a couple more that we're thinking of. Yeah. It's gonna be really fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.